In order to really clearly explain and understand what consultative selling is, I first want to talk about what is not consultative selling, and that is actually what I refer to as product selling. By the way, product selling, I personally believe, is what the majority of salespeople do. It really, to a degree of, I think that 95, 98% of salespeople do what I would call product selling. And so what I want to do is I want to outline how I view and define product selling. Basically, it's almost the opposite of that is what consultative selling is. Just to kind of fill out this column on the left side of what product selling is. So product selling is when a salesperson basically focuses on trying to get business, build their business by going out and talking about the product that they sell. Let's say they sell a set of products or services. They go out every day and try to talk to as many people as they can about the product they sell, and that's their main effort and strategy to generate sales and get customers. Because they're always going out and just talking primarily about their product and their company and their role in the organization, product selling is typically an all about me approach. This is what I sell. Do you need what I sell? A product selling salesperson will assume that every prospect that they encounter needs the product that they sell, or that they should try to talk every prospect that they cross paths with into trying to buy their product. An example is maybe a salesperson goes to a networking event with a room full of people. The product selling salesperson will view everybody in that room as a potential prospect. The product selling salesperson tries to sell the product to every prospect because they assume that every prospect can buy from them. They try to sell to everybody. And they're focused on selling products to prospects, which by itself, that might not sound like a bad thing. If you're a salesperson, you should be trying to sell products to prospects. But when we talk about consultative selling, it'll be a little bit more clear why that might not be the optimum way to go. The product selling salesperson tries to sell the product at every step of the sales process. Most products need some steps that you go through, and the product selling salesperson will try to sell the product at every step. Let me give you an example. So if a salesperson sells web design services, I get emails every day, are you looking to redo your website? When they ask me, are you looking to redo your website? Even though we would have to have a conversation, multiple conversations, and there would be some sort of sales process, some sort of sales cycle. That question of, do you need what I sell, is trying to close the product at that particular point in the sales process. Product selling salespeople do most of the talking. They are trying to talk prospects into buying from them. And to do that, they're just talking as much as they can about their product and about their company. And their pitch primarily centers around explanations around the product they sell and descriptions around what the product does. In fact, a product selling salesperson, when they're thinking about how can I generate more sales or close more deals or generate more leads, they're typically trying to think about how can I describe my product in a more inviting way to build more interest. So their pitch is all around the product. And they're trying to basically talk the prospect into being interested. They're trying to talk to the prospect about the product to get them interested, which again, by itself, sounds logical. You sell a product, let's try to talk as much as we can about the product to get the prospect interested. When we talk about consultative selling, I'll talk to you about maybe doing that in a more optimum way. Now, if you look at all of these things above, this shows you that the product selling salesperson is more focused on their own interests. Whenever you're negotiating anything, there's two parties involved, and each party has its own set of interests. So when you're trying to sell something, when a salesperson is trying to sell something to a prospect, each party has their own interests. The salesperson's interest is selling their product, hitting their sales targets, getting commission, getting promoted, all these things. That's their interest, providing for their family. Those interests are totally different than the prospects. The prospects' interests are maybe around their own company, their own job, their own income. So these interests are totally different. Now, it's not to say that you have to totally ignore your interests to be a consultative selling salesperson, but the product selling salesperson is all about their own interests. My product, my company, are you interested in buying from me so I can close a sale and I can make money? It's not focused much on the prospect's interest. The last point here is that the product selling salesperson, it tries to overcome objections. By the way, we all face objections. Objections are guaranteed, but the product selling salesperson tries to overcome objections by talking talking about the product. For example, if the prospect says, I'm not interested, the product selling salesperson will try to talk more about the product in order to try to overcome that, in order to try to make the prospect change from not interested to interested. Now, there are times where you need to face objections head on and overcome objections, but the consultative selling approach will be a different way than just trying to power through and talk about the product. That's what I consider product selling to be. And like I said, I think that most salespeople out there, this is how most salespeople are selling. You might not see how bad that is until we talk about consultative selling, but actually, let's look at what a product selling email might look like. And this is just an outline. This isn't a full email. But if we take that approach, what would that look like in an email? And I can tell you, I get emails like this every single day, especially on LinkedIn. But hi, prospect. I'm a senior account manager with company X. We provide product 1, 2, 3. I'm reaching out to you to see if you need what I sell. Can I schedule a 20 to 30 minute meeting with you to try to get you to buy what I sell? Best regards. Now, a little bit of that is, of course, not what a real salesperson would do. They wouldn't be that direct. But believe it or not, the real product selling cold emails are not too far from that. It's, this is who I work with. This is what we sell. Are you looking to make a change? Do you need what I sell? Can I schedule a meeting with you? So this message here is a little bit of tongue in cheek, but it's not too far from what a product selling email will do. And as you can see, if you send that email to someone that is at that particular moment looking to make a change and looking to buy what you sell, that's not a bad email, because you might get a response and you might be able to sell something. The challenge there is that you have to time it perfectly. With product selling, you have to time it perfectly where you cross paths with a prospect and they're looking to buy what you sell, and you can just power through and push your product. The challenge with that is that timing it perfectly can be challenging. And a lot of times when you're doing cold prospecting, cold outreach, most of the time, most of the prospects that you encounter are not in buying mode at that particular time for what you sell. As a result, you might want to use a little bit more of an indirect approach. And the consultative selling approach, not only is it a more effective approach that we show you here today, but it's a little bit not so direct, so you won't have to time it as perfectly. But if you are at a point where you can see that product selling might not be the optimum way to go, let's try to look at why do we do this? Well, first of all, one main reason why 90% of salespeople sell this way is because it's how we're trained. And I'll show you that in a second. It's also what your natural instinct is. It's very understandable to be a product selling, product pushing salesperson because you have a product to sell. You are hired to sell this product. You have targets. We're coin operated. You make money when you sell your product. So it's your only natural instinct to go out and talk about your product as much as you can. It's very reasonable. In fact, it's intuitive to be a product selling salesperson. It's counterintuitive to do some of the consultative selling stuff that I'm going to talk about here in a minute. Product selling also could potentially be an easier way to sell. I'm actually going to come back to that thought at the end of this presentation, because there's a case to be made that consultative selling is actually easier overall, but product selling is easier because basically you already have all this product knowledge in your head. And so a product selling salesperson just going out and talking about their product. So it is in some ways easier. But let's talk about why companies train people to be product selling salespeople. First of all, they might think that the correct thing to do. We're hiring salespeople. Let's teach them to be product selling. We want them to sell our products. But the way that looks like, if you're onboarded, and I'm speaking from experience multiple times over, when you go through new sales hire onboard training, this is what it typically looks like. You go through some training. This is the company that you work for now. This is what you're going to be selling. This is what the products do. This is what the products include and the different ways you can sell the products in terms of features. These are some benefits that are offered. And this becomes your foundation and knowledge. You're hit with a fire hose of this information through training. And then every day and every week, you're still exposed to more and more of this information. You go to work every day for the company. So you're continuing to build on this knowledge, and this becomes your foundation and knowledge. You begin to grow a wealth of experience in all of these areas. You talk about it so much. This also becomes what you become interested in. You know, if you watch a lot of golf, you know a lot of the players on tour, you become interested in talking about golf and playing golf. Well, this becomes your hobby because you live and breathe it every day. So you have a lot of interest in these areas. And then this is also where you get paid, is by selling this stuff. The problem with that is that all of this is all about me. It's very inward focused. Me, my product, my company. And this becomes the foundation that we build on when it's time to basically go out and communicate with prospects. So when we're introducing ourselves at a networking event, when someone says, what do you do? Oh, I sell such and such. You're talking about your company and your product. When you send cold emails, like I outlined earlier, you're using this knowledge. When you're networking, when you're making cold calls, when basically anytime you're talking to a prospect, you're basically accessing all of these data stores of this knowledge in your head. And that's what you're using to think about when you're thinking about what to say. Now, an alternative approach, let's start to talk about consultative selling now. Consultative selling kind of turns all of that upside down. So instead of really starting with, this is who I work for, we're starting with, this is the value that you offer. This is how the value is what your products or services help the customer, the prospect to do. So we start with the improvements that you can deliver. We also talk about the problems and the pain points that your service or product makes go away. In order to find if your prospects have pain points and fit well with what you need, a consultative selling salesperson, the core of their sales message is asking good questions. Then at some point, you do need to connect the prospect's needs and problems with your solution in terms of your product. So there is a time and place to talk about your product and talk about your company. Although what we teach when we're teaching our consultative approach is don't just talk about the product and what it does, but talk about how your product differs from the competition. Talk about how your company is different, or some ways that your company is better, or some bragging points. And then the last piece of this consultative approach is sharing customer examples. So after you've connected with how your company can solve your customers' problems, share an example of how you solved problems or created improvements at another customer. In the consultative selling approach, we create a foundation of this. And this is focused on the prospect first. Yes, this approach does include us talking about our product and our company, but first we're focused on the prospect. And when we have this as the foundation, then we can rely on all of this knowledge, and this can then improve what we say when we introduce ourselves, make calls, send emails, networking, what we say on our website, everything we say when we're going out there. The other thing that's different about a product selling salesperson, I talked about this a minute ago, was that at every step of the sales process, they're trying to sell their product. And so let me show you what that looks like and how that differs from consultative selling from a visual standpoint. So if we take kind of a sales process and get the two bookends, the beginning and the end of the sales process or the sales cycle would be, it all starts with the first interaction. This could be a cold call, could be a cold email. The last step is ultimately the prospect purchases from you. So they go from a prospect to a customer. Now, the product selling salesperson, they're focused straight on this. So like I said, even if there are many conversations between these two steps, even in that first conversation, that product selling salesperson is focused on, I sell this, do you need what I sell? Now, the consultative approach focuses on not selling the product, but selling the steps in between. For example, selling the conversation. So there's not a revolutionary saying out there, but it's don't sell the product, sell the meeting. And this is what we're talking about here is at some point there needs to be a conversation, and this could be on the phone, even at the same time as a cold call, but the consultative salesperson is trying to sell the conversation. And that's one difference between consultative selling and product selling, because the consultative salesperson doesn't know whether or not the prospect even needs or fits well with the product they offer. So they need to ask some questions. And the place where they start to learn about the prospect and ask questions is the conversation. I showed you a few slides there with a bunch of graphics, and I want to just kind of simplify what I just talked about on the previous 3 slides. So if we're comparing product selling to consultative selling, just to make this super easy, this is product selling. It's a salesperson going out, talking about their company, their product, what their product does, and their benefits. The benefits is actually not too bad if the product selling salesperson gets to that. A lot of times it's the later thought, and sometimes the salesperson never gets there. But the goal for the product selling salesperson, customers, which again, if you look at that, you might say, well, that's what they should do as a salesperson. The goal is to get customers. And yes, I agree with that. At the end of the day, it's all about who gets the most customers. But this is the consultative selling approach. So we're starting with value, pain points, questions, product, company, name drop. And the goal of the approach is to start conversations. So that's so important, the starting conversations as opposed to getting customers, because in the smart sales system, what we're really focused on is improving how you communicate and what you say. Not only will we shift you from talking about the product product to talking about benefits and pain points and asking good questions. But if you shift your mind from, okay, I'm looking for people that need what I sell. Do you need what I sell? Which is the goal of getting customers. If you can make that mindset shift to, okay, I'm just simply trying to sell the conversation, it can impact what you say. For example, if a prospect says to you, we don't have budget right now. If they don't have budget and they legitimately do not have budget right now, then you cannot sell to them and they cannot be a customer for you right now. And it doesn't make sense for you to keep talking to them. But if you're selling the conversation, the fact that they don't have budget right now doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter that you don't have budget because I'm not looking to sell you anything right now. I'm looking just to open the dialogue between our two companies and have a first conversation. That's an example of modifying how you would respond to an objection with the mindset change of trying to get customers and changing to selling the conversation. When you shift to selling the conversation, it impacts everything you say. It impacts what you say in your emails. It impacts your objection responses, your voicemails. So this is a big difference in how we structure consultative selling. So now let's compare how consultative selling matches up to each of these points. It's basically the exact opposite. So let's just go through each of these one point at a time. So if product selling focuses on talking about the product primarily, as you've already seen, consultative selling is different in that it focuses on talking about the prospect. So instead of talking about the product, we're talking about the prospect. Instead of being all about me, this is my company, this is what I do, this is the product I sell, it's all about the prospect. The way that it becomes all about the prospect is that the centerpiece of the consultative selling approach is asking good questions. And so it's the questions that help you to make it all about the prospect. And I told you that it probably sounds okay to try to sell the product to every prospect and to focus on selling products to prospects if you're a salesperson. But the consultative approach tries to find prospects that need what you sell. So it's kind of similar to being a doctor. Imagine being a doctor with medicine. Your medicine is only useful and needed by people that are sick. So if you were a product pushing doctor, you would try to give your medicine to everybody. And that might either lead to giving the medicine to people that don't need it, or more importantly, just in terms of the real world, it might lead to you wasting time talking to people about medicine that don't need medicine. So even if they seem open to your conversation, they, at the end of the day, are going to be difficult to close because they genuinely don't need it, even if they may want it. So the consultative approach is all about trying to find the prospects that need and are a good fit for you. And the approach is really using questions to figure out which prospects need what you sell. And when you learn about the prospects through a consultative approach and asking good questions, you're focused more on providing solutions to prospects' needs. You're more focused on solving their pain points with your product. Finding their pain points through asking good questions and then solving them, matching what you have to their needs. When you find prospects that don't have pain points, you're able to walk away from them and know which prospects to invest your valuable time in and which ones to walk away from because you're talking more about them and less about your product. And this is, if you look at where this point matches up to the product selling, I said the product selling salesperson focuses more on selling products to prospects. And that sounds probably okay when you look at it by itself. But without really knowing much about the prospects that you're talking to, you're trying to sell the products to everybody you end up talking to. Whereas the consultative approach will be selling more to the prospects that need what you sell. The consultative approach, I already talked about that. This is instead of trying to sell the product every time you talk to a prospect and more so validate that the prospect needs what you sell right now, the consultative approach is just trying to sell the next step in the sales process. And because you're asking good questions, instead of you doing all the talking and talking about your product, actually with consultative selling, the prospect either does equal amount of talking or more talking than you. And the pitch, the centerpiece of the consultative approach is not the product and describing what the product does. The centerpiece is asking good questions. And when you do end up talking about your product, it's all about the benefits, problems, return on investment, client examples, and you're using all of that to make the prospect interested. So where the product selling salesperson is just, I'm going to talk about the product as much as I can to make the prospect interested. And if they're not interested, I'm going to talk about the product more. The consultative salesperson talks more about things like return on investment and customer examples. And instead of trying to overcome objections by let me talk about the product more, the consultative approach focuses more on the prospect's interests and deflecting objections in terms of to try to get around objections. So that's the difference. Basically, on the left side there, product selling is what we all do naturally if we don't really push ourselves to not give in to our natural instincts. And then the right side was a consultative approach. I will say at first glance, product selling is easier. I kind of talked about this already a little bit because you already have all this product knowledge in your head. Even if you did not go through an extensive onboarding training at your company, you have a lot of product knowledge in your head just from working at a company all day, every day. So it's real easy just to access that. So when you're creating an email or you're jumping on the phone, it's easy just to talk about the product. It can also be difficult to know what questions to ask. So one of our main sayings here at SalesScripter is the best salesperson is the one that asks the best questions. And you may say, oh, I agree with that, but still not know what questions to ask. So it can be kind of difficult to become a consultative salesperson if you don't know what questions to ask. I agree with that. The other thing is that there can be a lot of different types of customers. So if you're really trying to be consultative and ask good questions and make it about the customer, it can be difficult because there are lots of different types of customers. Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. In a previous job, I was hired by a company and we were focused on different verticals. So I had manufacturing companies, I had healthcare companies, and my manager wanted me to go out and have business related conversations with our customers. I sold software, and I think his mind and his instinct was coming from the right place. And basically he was wanting me to be less of a product pusher. The problem with it is that he, was a bit green at the time, and I did not know a ton about the manufacturing industry, and I did not know a ton about the health, different hospitals that I was selling to and whatnot. So I tried to do some research and learn about these different industries, but you're a sales guy, you've been on the job for a couple months, and who knows how long you'll have that territory. How much can you become an expert in these huge industries? It can be difficult. What I show you, the smart sales approach will actually make this challenge go away. I'll talk about that in a minute, but I'll agree that that can make it more difficult. And it can be unclear what pain points to look for. So one of the sales trainings that I went through that I thought was really great was one of the first ones that shifted more from, it was less on product selling and more on you need to look for pain points, and that your prospects are going to fix and spend money on solving things that are hurting and aren't working well. And so you need to find that. And I love that. I thought that was really great stuff. I went through this training. I thought I need to find pain. I need to find pain. But when I got back to the desk and started doing prospecting, I did not know how to find out the pain that my prospects were having. I did not know what questions to ask to uncover pain. So I agree that even if you're looking for pain, it can be difficult to know what pain to look for. And the smart sales system, let me just stop here. And I'll say these do make consultative selling more difficult in that it's easier just to talk about your product instead of having business conversations and talking about pain and asking questions. So if you don't have a system to use like the smart system, which helps with all these areas, this consultative selling can be more difficult. But let me talk about how actually consultative selling might be easier in many ways. First of all, when you're a product pushing salesperson, your prospects are going to detect it. When they answer your call, when they read your emails, they're going to sense that you're trying to talk them into buying something. So you're going to trigger more guardedness when you're a product selling salesperson. When you trigger more guardedness, you're going to face more objections, and you're also going to face more rejection. So from that standpoint, by itself, if you shift from consultative selling, it will be easier. If not easier, and just in terms of resistance, easier from an anxiety and from a frustration standpoint, because you're not going to get beat up as much. It might be a little bit more difficult trying to figure out what to say, which, by the way, we're here to help you with what to say. That might be more difficult, but it's going to be easier overall. In addition, because you're asking good questions, you're going to end up working better quality leads, because instead of just talking about your product and pushing your product, you're going to be talking about your prospect. And so you're going to know which prospects need what you sell and which ones don't, and which ones to walk away from. So the quality of leads in your pipeline are going to be better. And because the leads are better, closing will actually be easier. It makes selling easier. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about closing deals. If you are a product selling outline salesperson, that's where you find yourself in trying to like be real pushy and aggressive to get prospects to buy from you. When you do consultative selling, closing is actually one of the easiest steps of the process. I mean, close can actually sometimes seem to take care of itself, and deals can often close on their own. And so in a lot of ways, consultative selling can be easier. But in terms of figuring out what to say, I do admit it can be a little bit, it's a more sophisticated approach to be consultative. The SMART system actually can help you with that. And even if you don't use the SMART sales system, if you outline the pain points that you're looking for and outline, I give this tip away a lot, but make a list of the pain points your product helps go away, then make a list of questions for each pain points. And right there, you'll have a good set of consultative questions to ask. If you just do those two steps, you're going to take a huge leap forward in terms of being a consultative salesperson. Now, where you end up, if we go back to the left side, if you genuinely want to have these business conversations like my manager wanted me to have with the manufacturers and with the healthcare organizations, the SMART sales system helps make this easier as well, because what my manager should have told me, instead of just saying, you need to go out and talk about like the manufacturing industry and speak the lingo, if I would have at least known the pain points that my product solves relative to manufacturers, which are different than the pain points relative to, if I change that buyer type, then healthcare hospitals might use the same product but solve different pain points. Then I can begin, if I just know the pain points and the questions with those pain points, I can then have those business conversations without having to understand those industries inside and out. So again, to have business conversations is, and from a real consultative standpoint, is difficult. It could take years to build up that knowledge. With the SMART system approach and how we help you to build your sales message, we kind of help you to fake it till you make it. And the way you're faking it is you don't understand the industry inside and out, but you understand the industry more specific to where your product applies in terms of the improvements your product makes, the pain points your product makes go away, and good questions to ask to see if that particular industry or that type of buyer persona, they have any of the challenges that you help make go away. So let me just give you an example, because you may say, well, consultative selling, what I sell is not real technical. So do I need consultative selling? And what I want to just point out is that consultative selling can be used for selling anything. It doesn't have to be technology or something technical. And let me give you an example of selling a gym membership and just show how this applies to selling this most simple product, and that you can use a consultative approach. And let me show you how the impact of changing from product selling to consultative selling. And I'm speaking from experience because I've been a gym rat my whole life, and I've signed up for many gyms. Every gym I've gone to, they've used a product selling approach. And what that looks like, you walk in, the first thing they do is they take you on a tour. Okay, they show you the facility. Here are our weights. Here's our yoga classes, our basketball court, our treadmills, our lap pool. Then they take you in the office and they say, here are our membership packages. Which one fits best with you? And then they try to close the sale. So that's basically a product selling approach. Let me show you the product. Then let me show you, and I'm showing you the features. Then I'm showing you your different options, and I try to close the sale. Now let's flip that and look at what that might look like from a consultative selling approach. If you wanted to sell gym memberships and be a consultative salesperson. So someone walks in interested in joining your gym. Before you take them on a tour, you have them sit down maybe in your office or in the cafe where they make smoothies or whatever, and you sit down. And then before you talk to them about the gym, the pricing, the packages, anything, you talk about them. You learn about them. What brought you out today? Do you go to a gym today? Tell me about your lifestyle. Tell me about your goals. What are you looking to improve? You're asking them good questions and learning about them. What type of exercises do you do? What's your level of expertise? What are your needs? So that could look anything like a 10-minute conversation, 30-minute conversation, whatever it is. Once you have the information you need, now instead of taking them on a tour of just showing them the different features, you can actually tailor the tour to what they told you. If they're really interested in yoga and they don't care about weights, then you can tailor your tour to show them all the different stuff about yoga. And you can show them the product in the perfect amount of way in a consultative approach, and you can identify what pain points they have have, and then match the solution you have, show them how you can solve their pain points, and show them, and then communicate what type of improvements you can make for them. So when you're talking about improvements, by the way, when I've gone to join gyms, they've never talked to me about the improvements. There's so many improvements that a gym will make for someone. The treadmills and the weights are features, but the improvements that someone can experience if they use those features are they can lose weight, they could get more fit, they could sleep better at night, they can increase their self-esteem, they can improve their career, improve their personal relationships. Those are all improvements that someone can make. You could talk about that as you're showing or after you show the product. So here are all the features. What you can get from this is these are the different ways that what I'm showing you here today can transform your life. Then you could share an example of someone else that was similar. Let's say that you are a middle-aged man who's overweight and hasn't worked out in his life. That consultative salesperson could share an experience of, let me tell you about someone else who is similar that came here. They signed up, they used this package, they used these types of product features in the facility. In this amount of time, this is what they were able to achieve. Imagine the amount of interest that all of that achieves. That instead of just talking about the product, you deliver a tailored tour, you connect the features with the pain points, you share the improvements that the features will deliver, you share an example of how that will help the particular buyer, and then you go for the close. And like I said, can you see now how the deals close themselves? So now when you show the different membership packages, the close is very easy. Think about how hard the close is for the product selling person in the situation. They just show the product, then they show the memberships, and they have no idea where the prospect is in terms of being qualified, and they haven't built all that interest by talking about solving the pain and connecting with the benefits and the customer example, and then they just try to do the hard sell. So it's a totally different thing, but as you can see, you can apply consultative selling to the most simple product. Anyways, that's where I want to leave it today with consultative selling, and this is where we are in the 16-week webinar series. So next week is we're going to work on building your sales message.